Hey all, Reddit Jedi here, subscribe for more of the best Reddit stories. Today's episode is, Redditors who work at remote places like forest officers, oil rig workers, etc. What creepy things have you noticed while at work? I used to work at a Boy Scout summer camp. Every week I had to take a big group of campers to a secluded spot for their wilderness survival badge where they had to build a shelter out of sticks, leaves, etc. and sleep in it overnight. The spot was only about 1/2 mile from the main camp, but we took them a circuitous route that made it seem really secluded. Anyways, on this one night all the campers had made their shelters, we had cooked dinner, and were all just sitting around the campfire. It was getting late, maybe 11 o'clock, so I sent all the campers to their shelters for the night and started cleaning up the fire. That's when we heard in the distance what sounded like church bells. They were pretty faint, but myself and my fellow staffers could definitely hear them. They went on for about 30 minutes, ringing every 30 seconds, or so. We were all a little creeped out, as there were no churches or towns within 20 miles of us. After the bells stopped, though, the singing started. It was too faint to hear the words, but it sounded like church choir music, but a lot of people, and a lot more enthusiastic. Also, it was almost midnight at this point. The singing went on for well over an hour, sometimes quieting down until we almost couldn't hear it, sometimes getting so loud we thought it was getting closer. All of the campers were super creeped out, but I lied to them, telling them there was a church service going on in camp, and that there was nothing to be scared of. Eventually, at almost 1 a.m., the singing stopped. I found out a few days later that there had been a large KKK rally only a few miles away that night, and that's what we had heard. I used to work in the Gulf of Mexico on oil rigs for years, and it may not exactly be creepy, but I found it really unsettling. In deep, open water, the water itself is really clear, so everyone can plainly see all the tuna and barracudas hanging around the rig waiting for the onboard cook to throw off whatever food waste he needs to. Every once in a while a huge great white shark would swim up from underneath and snatch a tuna, and it really took like less than a second. They're really scary. I worked for a guy that spearfished underneath the rigs out in the Gulf. He said it was perfect since there were tons of fish underneath, and the sharks would never go between the legs, just wait for a fish to leave. Plus the view was amazing, looking down and seeing nothing but abyss. He loved it. I can only imagine how scared I would be. There was this moment I had in the middle of the Caribbean where we had to untangle a rope from the engine in the middle of the sea. Getting tossed and turned and dragged by the wind was already rough enough for my novice self, and I only did by looking at the depth measurement tool telling me that we were in about 300 meters depth between islands and land was partially visible, so I jumped in and untangled the line in this clear blue water, and under the boat I see this big ass turtle just meandering along. On meeting eye to eye it dove immediately into the abyss. I watched for a while as it disappeared as a small dot and hopped back on the boat. I later commented on Journey about how it was interesting that the depth of the water was never past 300 meters, not thinking much of it. Captain gives a confused look, and upon realizing where I had found this information he informs me that the readings are only accurate up to 300 meters and will not read past that, and we're in at least 2 kilometers deep water if not more. The scale of the abyss hit me in that moment, followed by a huge sinking feeling. It's hard to communicate the scale of such things being that far from solid ground for a landlubber like me. Working late at night on a remote mine site, changing out a switch in a substation on the edge of the pit. Just me in a quiet room full of gently humming transformers. I finish up and head for the door, and I see 3 pairs of red eyes staring through the window. Nothing else visible, just blackness and 3 sets of red eyes. Turns out goats' eyes reflect red at night, and they like staring in windows. I've worked in Canada's north for a few years now in oil and gas. It's pretty creepy when during night shift you realize a moose has just been standing at the tree line staring you down for an unknown length of time. Or finding bear tracks crossing the tracks you just made 5 minutes ago. Honestly, the silence of a snowy forest in the dead of night 100s of km away from anything is pretty spooky. When your only contact to the outside world is a radio channel nobody's listening to, you feel pretty alone. Moose are freaky, man. Especially the screams, those things mess you up. Edit. My top comment of all time is about moose screaming. Yay. Occasionally biking out in the desert I'll stop and get a drink, and realize that there's a cow within 50 feet of me laying in a cow-sized patch of shade, or standing partly behind a rocky outcropping. It's unsettling how anything weighing half a ton can just blend in, especially when it's certainly aware of me long before I'm aware of it. And who knows how many times I haven't even noticed ninja cows. Edit. Holy cow, thanks for my first awards and my most upvoted comment. I used to be a delivery driver, which doesn't sound very remote because it isn't. However, I did have to deliver to some pretty remote places. One time I delivered to a trailer park just barely inside our designated delivery zone, and it was very dark and poorly lit. I leave my car running and keep the headlights and inside lights on to go deliver the pizza. Upon returning to my car, I sit down in the driver's seat and look up to see a creepy old man standing less than 3 feet from my side of the car. He was just staring. It was the equivalent of a jump scare. I just started driving forward, had to do a U-turn to get out of the park. When I turned around, the man was standing in the middle of the road, so I freaked out for a second before speeding around him only to watch him attempt to chase my car out of the trailer park. I put in my 2 weeks after that. You reminded me of something creepy that happened to me. I also used to be a delivery driver, but for a supermarket in the UK. A lot of our customers were in the middle of nowhere, and my last delivery of the night was a new customer I'd never been to before. I was already running late from all my previous deliveries and I was still trying to find this house at 10:30 p.m., even though my shift was supposed to finish at 10 p.m. I'm driving around the narrowest of country roads with nothing surrounding me but dark fields and hedgerows, looking for anything that might be a driveway. I hadn't seen another car or person for miles. Then all of a sudden I hear a loud thud on the side of my van, like something was thrown at it. No trees or anything else around for something to fall from, and I remember it specifically hitting the side. I looked in my mirrors and out the window, but there was nothing around me. Then it happened again, another thud on the side of my van. I drove back to the supermarket so fast and told my manager that I couldn't find the place. I had spent 30 minutes looking. To be fair, there was no house where the listed address postcode took me. That's what I thought, and I was never told that they phoned up to complain about their missing items and they were never attempted to redeliver. I think they were contacted to provide better directions to their address but were never heard from again. The weird part is they had to place the order and pay for their delivery items first, and at the time the shop had a minimum spend of £60 for deliveries. So if it was a prank, it was an expensive one. Also, the only thing around for miles was empty fields, and the only place someone could have hidden was within or behind a hedgerow, so if it was a human they must have been hiding in a freezing cold hedgerow for over an hour since my delivery was supposed to be scheduled for 9:30 p.m. I remember it was a particularly creepy night, with low-hanging fog in that area. There was no way I was getting out the van to check. I was cruising around 10 miles per hour scanning the hedgerow for a house sign when my van was hit. As soon as I heard the second hit, I had the accelerator pedal to the floor. I was on a boat sitting on anchor in a secluded bay in the early hours, in southeast Alaska a few years ago. I stepped outside for a smoke and all of a sudden I heard the most horrific sounds of a wild animal being murdered by another wild animal. It went on for probably 10 minutes. I know it's just nature, but man, I can still hear that sound in my brain and it haunts me. I used to do agricultural work, alone in a field for 10 hours a day kinda thing. The pure amount of times I heard the sound of running and snapped up to see literally nothing there was horrific. I was convinced it was surely animals between the trees for a while, but the weirdest moment was when I heard it loudly from a row of trees next to me and immediately ducked under to see the feet of whatever animal was running by, and there was absolutely nothing. I remember trying to stay calm and walking really fast to the toilet block and sitting in there for a good long while before I came back. I never thought I'd be so freaked out in the daytime, but there wasn't a soul nearby for quite a way and it really amped up my imagination. This and raccoons. I grew up afraid of the dark and my grandparents both had fairly large pieces of land. The one grandmother always had some horror movie playing, a lot of Yeti, Bigfoot, Sasquatch stuff. Needless to say, 10-year-old Kiltech would sprint from the car to the house every night we'd get there and I was sent to fetch the bags. Worst anxiety in the world being told, "Hey Kiltech, go get this from the car for me," after we pulled in late on a Friday. Only other fun story I have is that raccoons used to claw at the back window late at night at my other grandmother's house. You'd see the light reflecting off their eyes and I always slept on the couch beside those windows. I was always waiting to shine a light at them and it be something other than a raccoon, you know, like Bigfoot. I had a pretty dope childhood, full of imagination. I do a lot of work out in the woods. creepiest thing was finding some headless doves. I also found sticks arranged in circles and paint on the trees in the same spot. Not sure if it was part of a ritual or not, but that's what I saw. Edit. Okay, lots of great points that it could have been just wildlife or cats catching the doves. That's totally possible. I've seen cats do that before too. To add some more context, the type of doves found were not native to this area. It's possible they escaped or were released and had a run-in with a hungry house cat. And the painted circle of trees and sticks nearby was coincidence. Who knows, I certainly don't know what really happened, so it's all speculation. It's still the weirdest, creepiest thing I've ever found.